people like you, tiny, squalling brats, want to take our belongings at gunpoint because you are parasites on society and you only want to take and never produce. I'm going to name the cunt who left this comment Evensgrey, because this blatantly false accusation really makes my fucking blood boil for the brass balls that it takes. The irony of accusing someone like me of leeching from society, coming from someone who doesn't want to ever give back to the society that he has benefited from. I had intended to create a satirical piece to illustrate the ridiculousness of the reasoning used by these people, which is that they seem to want to give others the impression that we want government-sponsored agents, otherwise known as the police, to storm into their homes at the first sign of non-payment of their taxes, hold a gun to their heads and demand at the top of their lungs to hand over their personal belongings, at which point if they refused to hand over their belongings, or even so much as cited the Fourth Amendment, the police would summarily terminate their lives and then take whatever they thought would be of value to them. Then I decided that this kind of effort would be completely wasted. Those who already get the point that I'm making do not need that sort of illustration, and those that do not get it will still not see the point even if it's spelled out to them right in front of their faces. For the record, the state taking your belongings at gunpoint rarely happens. The reality is that you're actually being taxed a percentage of your income. You never have to give up your belongings unless you behave like a cunt and refuse to pay your taxes, and even then, you probably won't have to face the barrel of a gun in order to do so. Perhaps you'll face the barrel of a gun if the local sheriff is ordered to come and evict you from your house, because the private bank that sold you your mortgage and then decided to sell it on to various other private companies and other banks decides to foreclose on you despite you never having missed a payment except on just the one occasion which triggered that foreclosure. Yeah, that kind of gunpoint. Is that what we're talking about here? You see, there are regulations against this unscrupulous conduct in the UK, and I can already see libertarians like this cunt Evensgrey pulling their hair out about that one, screaming about how such regulations interfere with the right of a bank to play dirty tricks like this on their unsuspecting customers. I can guarantee it, but that's another video for another day. I'm going to briefly segue off of the talking point to argue for something important that is the cornerstone of my objection to libertarianism and the free market. One of my biggest complaints about certain libertarians, and let's face it, they're not all fucking insane, is their argument for why every single thing in society should be provided by the free market, and having certain things provided for by the free market means that there are going to be a lot of people lose out because they do not have a lot of economic clout. Yes, that means poor people. This is going to be a long talking point, so I can condense as much possible information as I can into it. One of the most essential parts of the United Kingdom's government schemes that I fight for is universal healthcare, and I do so purely from a basis of ethics. As far as I'm concerned, I do not wish to live in a society where people do not have a society-given right to life. Not just survival, but a decent quality of life provided for by decent health, which you can only get if you get yourself checked out by a doctor and can go to hospital whenever you need treatment. Libertarians argue that taking your belongings by force is immoral. I argue that letting people die just because they could not afford to pay a private industry an extortionate amount of money in health insurance premiums, or because their insurance policy excluded their medical condition, is far more immoral than expecting people to pay into a universally available healthcare system where everyone has a right to treatment, and more importantly where you will not be refused treatment on the grounds that you have a pre-existing health condition, or where an insurance company decides it did not want to pay for your treatment because it was too expensive. As previously mentioned in a previous video, the YouTube user Flowcell once argued that providing universal healthcare would weaken the gene pool, because people who wouldn't get treatment because they don't have enough money to pay for it would then be allowed to survive and continue to propagate their so-called weak genes throughout the gene pool. Aside from the fucking obvious eugenics nonsense that this stance betrays, he is wrong about the genetic component. A lot of people are poor through little to no fault of their own. Let's say you're a very creative individual who is wonderful when it comes to artistic representations of the real world. You have excellent genes that keep you healthy, and you maintain a good standard of living. But you are not recognized as the artist that you are, such that as a consequence you are forced to eke out a meagre living as a waiter at a restaurant someplace, earning just over minimum wage. Now let's say that including tips you earn just over the cut-off allowance of 250% above the federal poverty level in the US and therefore have no write-off of your medical expenses in the state that you live in. Now let's say that you're involved in a car accident that was someone else's fault because they decided they weren't going to obey the traffic laws because those traffic laws infringed on their individual liberty. You receive critical injuries to several major organs because they were driving way too fast. Remember, their individual liberties were all important and speed limits infringed upon them. Now as a consequence of this car accident, you end up in hospital, you undergo emergency surgery to save your life, and you have a major debt over your head at the end of it and no way to pay it. Now in that particular example, your genetics was not a factor. Your genetic profile was actually very beneficial to the species as a whole because of your fitness and your talent as an artist. Yet you were not able to pay your medical bills, and though you were granted emergency surgery for your injuries, you could not afford to make any further payments for essential but non-emergency medical treatment. Therefore, the only time you could be seen by anyone is if your condition subsequently became life-threatening. Your quality of life never recovered because you could not afford proper inpatient or outpatient care, and eventually the injuries you received became terminal and you subsequently died. Would universal healthcare cause your genetic profile to weaken the gene pool by allowing you to receive proper healthcare, thereby allowing you to receive the treatment you needed, thereby allowing you to continue living your life and potentially passing on your perfectly healthy genes to the next generation? No. Not everyone who is poor because of defective genetics. Not everyone is poor because they are lazy and don't do anything for a living. Not everyone is poor because they are stupid. In fact, there are a lot of very rich people who are complete fucking morons. And yet you wouldn't argue that they are polluting the gene pool by their stupidity because the free market healthcare system you so badly want to enact in the first world country of the United States would have allowed those people to live simply because they have access to a lot of money. Back to the issue of so-called parasitism. People who work for a living pay their taxes. Just because I, for example, do not own a business and create jobs does not mean that I am a fucking parasite on society. I have spent a very long time working for a living and paying my taxes. That's not leeching. That is actually providing into the system, you fucking moron. My labour is what helps business owners earn their profits by providing the services that they need to allow them to operate. Now if you don't work, you don't pay taxes on your income. It's not rocket science. And the only parasites on society are those who want all of the benefits of living in a territory where society exists while never paying back into it from their earnings, preferring instead to hoard all of their income to themselves. And this includes people like that cunt Evensgrey and his fucking buddies such as shanedk, Who Shelter, Hawkeye, Virgil0211, Rock'n'Roll 44, VSPQBD, Gun Criminal, and a whole host of people who think that there should be a completely open, free-for-all capitalistic society whereby the only time you contribute to society's upkeep is when you want to, and these people would never want to, thereby being a part of the free rider problem. A society, in order to avoid letting people starve on the streets, or catch diseases from drinking water, or let infrastructure fail in ways that would wipe out 90% of the population of the Western world, and so on, has to maintain a basic level of support for everyone who is in that society. These people don't want to pay for that, and they don't want to be made to have to pay for it, thereby taking advantage of everyone else paying for it. And yet they call people like me, people who understand the need for everyone, including myself, to contribute to the upkeep of society, parasites. It's nothing more than an act of projection combined with insulting behaviour. Go fuck yourselves.